I'm Mike Casey, and I am the Director of Software Engineering for Marathon Digital Holdings, specifically the tech team. And we're here to present on Anduro, which is a native Bitcoin sidechain platform. And we really take that seriously. It's not big B native. It is not the network, Bitcoin network native, because it is a sidechain. But in all other regards, we try to be as purely Bitcoin as possible. So what makes a Bitcoin sidechain or anything else? What makes it truly Bitcoin versus anything else? And these are my own definitions. This is not there's no canonical thing of what makes something that is not part of actual consensus on Bitcoin, part of the Bitcoin ecosystem. That's something everybody has to find for themselves. These are my definitions. What makes a sidechain actually a true Bitcoin sidechain? For me, there's three criteria. One, it is a Bitcoin-denominated native asset, so you don't have to buy anything other than Bitcoin to participate in this ecosystem. It is Bitcoin. Part of that, all fees in the sidechain are paid in this Bitcoin-denominated asset, and that asset has to be redeemable for the equivalent amount of Bitcoin. Noticing a theme? I'm going to say Bitcoin a lot here. Native asset is freely swappable for Bitcoin. That means it's not just locked up and there is only a redemption mechanism to get your Bitcoin back through, well, let's say a federation. That can't be the only way to get it back. It has to be freely tradable for Bitcoin. And my third criteria is it must support layer 1 Bitcoin through merge mining and pay fees to Bitcoin miners. Incentives get really screwed up in Bitcoin if all of the money and transactability starts flowing to layer 2s, where you have these super nodes and Lightning Network operators. Everybody's making money and none of it goes to the Bitcoin miners. The incentive of the Bitcoin miners, instead of processing Bitcoin transactions and collecting fees, becomes extorting these layer 2s. And I don't want to see that happen. I want to see Bitcoin remain censorship resistant. So, in order to figure out why we arrived at what we did for what I deem to be the best possible Bitcoin sidechain we could come up with, we have to go through the history of what I term meta Bitcoin. And what meta Bitcoin is, some people say L2, but it's really, really broader than that, because a lot of these things existed before L2 solutions did. And this isn't an exhaustive list, by the way. But so the first thing that really came of Bitcoin way, way back in the long ago of, 2015 or so, was a one-way peg. Actually, probably even earlier. So this was with counterparty, made safe, Mastercoin, which made safe became. What a one-way peg is it's another asset with its own chain. But the only way to create the primary asset of that chain is to burn Bitcoin. So it has a provable, limited, scarce resource in that main chain, because the only way to create that is to provably burn Bitcoin forever. So pros, well, you have a provably finite asset supply, right? That you're guaranteed. But as soon as you burn the Bitcoin, that asset's price is no longer linked to Bitcoin, because there's no way to get it back. So the chain itself and the asset itself, if you go burn Bitcoin and collect this asset, there's no way of ever getting your Bitcoin back, and the asset you have now has no relation to the price of Bitcoin. So other cons is the asset price isn't tied to Bitcoin at all, and you burn flipping Bitcoin. Like, how dumb do you have to be to have Bitcoin and just light it on fire? Now, this was 2015. It wasn't worth quite what it is today. But can you imagine on these systems how much Bitcoin was lost forever? It's not a huge amount, but if they had kept it, what would it be worth today? So that's a one-way peg sidechain. Then you have a two-way peg sidechain. And these are the likes of liquid and rootstock that have been around. This is also what we've elected for our pegging mechanism. And the pros of this, it's a one-to-one asset spawned by locking up Bitcoin, in this case a multi-sig. And the sidechain asset can be redeemed for Bitcoin. So you can get it back out of the system and you have your Bitcoin back. But while it's in the other sidechain system, you can do more with it. It's not limited or bound by the rules of the Bitcoin protocol. Instead, you can, run smart contracts as you would on Ethereum, or I don't know, any given consensus mechanism or any given scripting language can be implemented on these sidechains. It's just at the end of the day, it goes back to Bitcoin. So the cons with this is counterparty risk, because yes, if you are locking it up in a multi-sig, that multi-sig still exists on Bitcoin. It hasn't left Bitcoin, but you have to rely that counterparty's not going to lose the keys and they're not going to steal it and run away with it. Although, granted, if there's a finite number of actors in a large enough honeypot, the risk of theft is lower because everybody will know what happened and they will be gone after. But still, it's a risk. Drive chains, recently proposed. These are blind merge mine side chains. Pros of it is extremely tight integration with the consensus core of Bitcoin. It is Bitcoin through and through. Everything is Bitcoin denominated, and 100% of the fees go back to miners. All this is great, except for it can't work without a consensus soft fork. There's no way to implement drive chains right now, and there does not look like there's any consensus to do so anytime soon. So rollups. Have you guys, how many people here are familiar with OpCat, OpCTV? Yeah. Okay. So there are many, many people right now that are trying to develop rollup systems through optimistic and zero-knowledge proofs on Bitcoin. So this is great if you can do it. That's wonderful. It opens up wide worlds of things, and you can have unlimited transaction sets that end up keeping their state reconciliation on Bitcoin directly. So that's good. You get lots of optimistic assurances and lots of zero-knowledge proofs that bounce around, but that's great. Again, it's all Bitcoin denominated. There's no other asset. Again, wonderful. The problem is, like with drive chains, it requires a soft fork. And there's two of them. There's OpCTV, which would be required for Arc to work. And for like CatVM or any style of those, you would require OpCat. And so far there's been no consensus around either one of those either. And as Bitcoin gets worth more and more and ossifies, it becomes harder and harder to make changes to this core protocol. So if we're tasked, as we were, with building something in the current environment that works right now, this just isn't an option for us. And quite frankly, another concern is, let's say we implement rollups and you can do anything on Bitcoin. Well, that's already been done on Ethereum. So Bitcoin just kind of becomes a crappier version of that. So, I mean, and you look at Ethereum right now and the state of it, it's kind of a dumpster. So I don't know if we want to go down that path. And, what becomes of Bitcoin if we do? So another thing, prover-based two-way pegs, BitVM. Is everybody here familiar with BitVM, I assume? Yeah. Well, BitVM is great. At a high level, I'll go ahead and describe what it is. BitVM uses logical circuitry that is coded in Bitcoin opcodes to define a logical circuit that holds a proof. So you can implement a prover situation, and then it leverages that circuit in a tap tree structure that ends up with a sometimes quite sizable, and I will make a shell if you're trying to make a BitVM proof. The best way to use that is with Marathon Slipstream service, because we allow for non-standard transactions, so you can have insanely large proof sizes. And some of the things that we're trying to do with BitVM are only possible if you do these mega-sized transactions for your proofs. So anyway, that tap tree structure, what it does is it holds with it the commitments for that logical circuit. So you can use it to develop a smart contract between multiple parties, and if somebody violates that, then you can have a system set up such that there are 99 verifiers. So you don't have to trust, unlike a multi-sig, you don't have to trust a majority of those to be honest. If any one of those is honest, you can make a claim against them, say, hey, we had an agreement, and in this case, a peg, a two-way peg, and say, yes, I tried to withdraw, you, per your end of the agreement, did not allow me to withdraw, and I have proof of that. It will actually run through the entire logical circuit that is encoded in the tap tree, and yeah, there you go, here's your proof, they now forfeit their funds. It's very strong, it's very powerful, but it's not yet a workable solution. I would very, very, very much like to integrate this into Anduro's peg mechanism to decentralize it further, because there is no need to trust anybody with a federation-style peg if there is another viable alternative. Unfortunately, we live in the world we live in today, so that's what we've done. And it will remain that way until this becomes feasible, which is on the horizon. Indexer-based asset systems, ordinals, runes, BRC20. So this is another part of Meta Bitcoin. What is really good about it? It's actually Bitcoin. It's as Bitcoin gets, because it literally exists on main chain. That's where the transactions occur. It enables new features on top of Bitcoin, so you can actually have, in the case of all these, you have fungible and non-fungible tokens that actually run and are transactable on Bitcoin using assets that are recorded on the Bitcoin blockchain. Now, this is contentious. Not everybody likes this. Some people really, really don't like that this is possible, but it's funny because those are the same people who actually made it possible with Segwit and Taproot, because you really couldn't do this without those. But yeah, the cons of this is the assets themselves that are created, you can see the movements and track the movements of the assets on the blockchain, but it doesn't recognize the fact that they're assets. It's completely agnostic to the assets themselves. It does not say you have this many BRC20 token on the blockchain, because the protocol is implemented on a layer above the blockchain itself. It is encoded and enshrined as data in the blockchain, so it lives on the blockchain, but it's not native to the Bitcoin blockchain in and of itself. So, and the other thing is, because it lives on a meta layer, and you have other protocols like ORD that actually apply the rules that are outside of Bitcoin consensus, those rules can be changed, right? For good or ill. It does allow for faster response time, but it's mutable, right? It's not like Bitcoin, which it's very difficult to teach anything in Bitcoin. So given all these things, we had to make a sidechain. We actually had to make a sidechain platform because, importantly, that's what Anduro is. It is not just a single sidechain. It is a sidechain platform. 2 of them exist today. I'm going to go through briefly at a high level the decision tree that I used to figure out exactly what we wanted to implement, right? So again, we have the first decision is, what is our consensus mechanism, right? What are we actually going to use? There's multiple different ones. We could try to implement ZK on it. We could use Stacks' level proof of transfer. I actually didn't even include that one. I don't really even consider Stacks to be meta Bitcoin, to be honest. but yeah, it has a very tenuous relationship with Bitcoin, I would say. But yeah, and of course, if we're talking about something being native Bitcoin, in the case of Stacks and many others, is that they have their own token that is not Bitcoin that they fundraise off of, and it's not Bitcoin, it's something else. So we could do purely permission consensus like Liquid, which, quite frankly, I call that a cartel, because you have a limited set of actors that make all of the rules. There's no way around it, and if they want to censor you, they will. And they're the only ones who can collect any fees. There's never any other opportunity for anybody external to the system to collect fees, and which is kind of crazy that it costs anything at all on Liquid, because what's the price determined? It's just storage, right? Anyway, I don't understand. I don't claim to understand their logic. But so that leaves us with, okay, well, obviously we want to do merge mining. That's an easy no-brainer. We're Marathon Digital Holdings, rebranded to Mara. We are a Bitcoin miner. First and foremost, we love Bitcoin and we mine. So if we're going to build a sidechain, of course it's going to be SHA-256 merge mining, which of course uses Bitcoin's proof of work to actually provide the proof of work. And then specifically, these are actual Bitcoin hashes. A lot of people don't understand truly how merge mining works, and they think it has something to do with anchoring on the Bitcoin blockchain. No, that's not really it. That's a side effect. What merge mining actually does, and I'll be giving a talk more in depth on merge mining later, is what it does is it actually takes Bitcoin's actual proof of work. So these are Bitcoin blocks that are mined, but they are not mined with sufficient difficulty to be included with Bitcoin and finalize that block. So given that, and connect it to the chain. But these side chains have Bitcoin difficulty, or have Bitcoin proof of work difficulty that is much lower. So it allows you to actually reapply the existing work from mining Bitcoin to mining Bitcoin. It's not like you have to choose. You don't have to choose. You mine both at the same time. The only thing you include in the Bitcoin block is just a simple hash in your op return of your Coinbase. That's it. And then from that, you can have an entirely different branch that represents. So funnily enough, merge mining, I'll get off the rant soon, but it was actually invented by Satoshi Nakamoto himself. And it was an old platform he proposed called BitDNS, which later became Namecoin, which is still merge mined today. It's all but dead, but it's still around, and you can still merge mine it today. But and he described it probably the best way. It's you take a Bitcoin block, and then you have two branches, and one branch is the sidechain block, and the other branch is the Bitcoin block. And all you do is you break off the branch and show the header of the same thing with its appropriate thing to the appropriate block, but you're only actually mining one header. So anyway, merge mining is extremely powerful, and it pays the Bitcoin miners. That's what we want. We want more transaction revenues for miners because that encourages them, as the block reward subsidy wanes, to spend more money on hash and secure the Bitcoin network. So, okay. Now we know we want to do merge mining. Duh. All right. So what are we going to have for our asset? We could do a one-way pegged asset. I don't think that's likely. We can do an altcoin asset, which, oh yeah, let's start a non-Bitcoin asset and do merge mining for it and come here to Bitcoin 2024 and try to get everybody to buy our shitcoin and see how that, no, let's not do that actually. How about a two-way peg Bitcoin native asset? How about that? So that's what we've done. So, okay, now that we have done that, so we have two choices here. Again, this was all done. We started this effort long before BitPM became a thing, and it's still, I would say, not viable at this point. But we had two choices. We had custodial and federated. So obviously we chose the federated solution because as good as custodians like BitGo are for wrap BTC, if you want to port it over Ethereum, okay, good for you, that's great. I don't trust any one single entity with any keys to any of my Bitcoin, and I don't suggest that anyone does either. So we selected a federated multi-sig, and we ended up settling with a 15-member consortium that we refer to as the Anduro Collective. The Anduro Collective administers all of our sidechains. Currently, we have two. So next is we need to fork or alter an existing chain because I don't feel like writing one from scratch. So which one? And we were looking at it, and we're building a platform here. We're building a consensus mechanism. And the consensus mechanism that we built is a hybrid federation merge mine system, right? It does both actions, right? And it's a platform, importantly. You can run any multiple of side chains against this backend mechanism. So we started with two. And we did implement an Ethereum EVM simply because it's, quite frankly, the most robust tool set and most developer-friendly thing out there for smart contract building at present. It's the most widely adopted. There's huge amounts of tooling that have been into it. There's literally hundreds of thousands of trained Solidity developers. And quite frankly, in the emergence of the intervening time, I can't even count the number of EVM sidechains there are now in existence. So it's something that we have to have, and we have to be able to compete in order to do smart contracts and do RWA and transaction use cases that need where you're trying to send payments through banking system on rail. If you're trying to do anything like that, you have to have a full and robust smart contract solution. But also, we're Bitcoiners, right? I don't know about you, but I like Bitcoin. My only complaint about Bitcoin is it's kind of expensive and kind of slow. That's the two biggest complaints I have. I love everything else about it, but I would like my transactions to be final quicker. I would like to be able to send anybody any amount of Bitcoin anywhere in the world in a relatively short period of time, and it's as quick as possible, and for as low fee as possible in a assured manner. So if you do adopt Bitcoin as a sidechain, you get a number of things along with it, because again, it's Bitcoin, right? So it's backward compatible with Bitcoin, and I just did my talk on Coordinate. I'm sure everybody saw that, but the Coordinate blockchain is our Bitcoin sidechain. It's backward compatible with the Lightning Net, with anything you do in Bitcoin right now, including Lightning Network channels. And going back to my original point, what makes Bitcoin, what makes a sidechain a true Bitcoin sidechain? Not only does it have to have a native asset that is Bitcoin-denominated, and no other native asset is allowed, and that's the asset in which you pay fees. And you also have to be able to exchange it back into Bitcoin by not going through a central party like a federation. So there has to be enabled other routes for you to do it. So one way to do that is to get it listed on all the exchanges, which we're working toward, or liquidity pools too. But again, it's in beta, it's only on testnet, it's kind of hard to get listed. But we do have an integration with Portal, and at launch of our main chain solution, we are pretty sure we will have a Lightning Network submarine swap apparatus that you can actually use to get your Coordinate BTC, the primary Bitcoin-denominated asset pack, and do a one-to-one swap with it for real Bitcoin over the Lightning Network. And this is something that's really only possible with Bitcoin. I mean, yeah, you could hack into something in Ethereum, I suppose, but with Bitcoin, it's easy. It's already integrated. So we have now the two chains, Coordinate and Alice, and as of last Friday, they are now open source and public. So you can go hit them right now. So Coordinate is at github.com Anduro project /coordinate, and same thing, github.com Anduro project /Alice, ALYS. Alice is your EVM chain, and Coordinate is actually the name is based off of ordinals, because this is a place that you can do ordinal-like activity on Bitcoin. It has additional features and functionality, fast, cheap transactions with a totally bitchin' fee model, if I do say so myself, where you actually you don't overpay for fees ever. It's an interesting bid system. I'll be going over it again tomorrow, but it is a system whereby you set a max reserve fee amount and people bid for space through a reverse auction, and you never overpay for transactions anymore. They're fill or kill, and these type of transactions are done and processed and finalized in about a minute. The other one is Alice. Alice, again, this is a high-speed, higher speed consensus, because it's the Quorum Consensus Federation, Ethereum EVM project. But again, those blocks are merge mined. Very important to all of this. 80% of the revenue for all of these type of transactions that involve the collective, the federation, 80% of those revenue from those transactions does not go to the collective. It goes to the miners that then mine the blocks on top, which enshrine it in the blockchain. That's extremely important. And that, to me, is what makes this project Bitcoin native. It pays back the L1 miners, doesn't use any other coin than Bitcoin. And it's part of the larger Bitcoin ecosystem. And yeah. Any questions? Yeah.
On any of these Hey there, just representing Oracle's bot here. On any one of these sidechains, the thing that would be useful for us would be to isolate a Satoshi that carries an inscription and trade that as an isolated Satoshi rather than using and having 546 Satoshis in every single Oracle transaction. That's kind of cumbersome and unscalable in the long run, and I'm wondering whether or not you can speak to if there is an innovation there, what can we do to help with that?
Yeah, okay. So it's not going to be there at our beta release, definitely, which it's already publicly beta. We don't have this functionality, but the intent from Bitcoin main chain is to allow Ordinals creator to bridge over Ordinals to coordinate, and from there. And the most interesting thing about coordinate is once your assets are over there, they actually can be transacted natively with Bitcoin script. So in other words, what coordinate does is it adds colored coins to the mempool. You don't no longer just have one asset, you have n number of assets, and they all have their own UTXOs. And the UTXO specifies not just here's an amount of Bitcoin and here's a locking script. It says, oh, it's also this asset. So based on that, you can just use regular Bitcoin transactions once they're over, and you can send them to and fro and everywhere, but it's redeemable again. So this, what you would do is you would send the Satoshi that represents it to the collective, and they would bridge it over using either existing multi-sig or ideally in a future state, a BitVM proof to custody that and allow you to retrieve it back via a ZK model. But yeah, but then once it's over there and the Federation has it, they can spawn it on top of coordinate, and you can freely transact in there. This is useful for, let's say you wanted to do a mass distribution of assets based on an image and have a bunch of coins for that, right? Okay, that's great. You want to do an airdrop of them. Okay, doing that on Bitcoin is extremely expensive. Doing it on coordinate is very cheap and easy. Yeah. But hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions? Thank you very much.
I might have one, but
yeah.
I feel bad as an audience. But really interesting. Like one of the things that we've seen is the fee on ordinals is kind of a feature, not a bug.
Yeah.
Because like what actually happened is because people are paying more money for the assets, it actually accrues more value. Obviously, like Solana, for example, has gone completely digital.
Yeah, the opposite direction. They're just, which we that's not our intent to go that direction and just get ludicrous with the amount of. It's not supposed to be zero fee. It's supposed to be low fee. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I was looking to clarify that.
Yeah.
And
So I mean, Bitcoin will always be Bitcoin, and we're not trying to end Ordinals activity on Bitcoin because Ordinals will always be there. But for those who are maybe stymied, and maybe if your goal is to create an asset and have it be as rare and as expensive as possible, and that's your goal, then yeah, you probably want to stick with that. But if your goal is to build something that actually does things and people interact with, that might not be the best place. So.
yeah, and we're 100% they're really interesting to understand this strategy.
Yeah. So what was the last thing you said? Can you hold the mic a little closer?
Sorry. So really fascinating to understand your strategic direction with this and kind of how it will end up, kind of where it will sit in the crypto ecosystem.
Yeah. Well, we hope that there is demand for this, and quite frankly, part of the reason, because you bring up ordinals, obviously you're into ordinals, but if you've been in Bitcoin as long as I have, you see this is happened before. I mean, not many people know this, but Tether was actually created on Bitcoin. It was the first tokenized assets weren't on Ethereum. They were all on Bitcoin. There was Spells of Genesis was an actual card game, and it had the first NFTs on it. And then there's Rare Pepe on Counterparty. So all of this NFT stuff, all of these tokens, again, Tether, the first actual fungible token, was created on Bitcoin. And this stuff didn't spawn on Ethereum. Ethereum just created an easier way to deal with these things in a more native way. So, we don't want people to go to Ethereum to deal with these things. We want them to stay in the Bitcoin ecosystem. So the other thing about it is, every time that's happened, and I've seen multiple waves, starting first with Vitalik and his early attempts at color coins before he got frustrated and he left to start Ethereum. He was trying to build color coins in 2013 on Bitcoin because he wanted to do this natively on Bitcoin. And he realized that would be too difficult to convince other people of, so he went off to start Ethereum. And had we been able to capture that market, then, well, everything that exists in Ethereum today would probably be on Bitcoin. But again, what happened? Why did he end up going over there? What happened to the color coin effort? Well, the 2013 bull run happened, and prices spiked, and it got, you had so much transactional activity and fees rose so much, nobody wanted to deal with any of these assets because it was just too expensive, it was too pricey, and the entire ecosystem died out. Again, 2017, we had Counterparty, we had Mastercoin, MadeSafe, we had Tether on Bitcoin. What? Is Tether not on Bitcoin? No, it's not anymore. Well, what happened? Well, we had all of that. We had Rare Pepes. What happened to that ecosystem? 2017, what happened? We had a bull run. It priced all of this activity out. This entire ecosystem of creatives trying to do stuff were priced out by a massive increase in Bitcoin prices and activity on chain and fees and everything. So you literally couldn't get your transactions in, and interest waned, and these things just died. I like these things, and I like them having to do something with Bitcoin, and I don't want to see them die again. Because the same fate, if we go into another bull run, which I would love to see personally, I don't know about any of you, but it would likely kill all of this innovation off if there's nowhere else to do it while that activity is going on. And partially what this is it is a place to allow for scale where you can do these activities and you can create and you can innovate, and it can live on past a hyper bull run cycle. And for those of you who don't know me, I did publish a paper years ago, and it was picked up by Vijay Boyapati in the bullish case for Bitcoin, predicting basically the pattern of these cycles. And so I'm very familiar with them. And I can't make any guarantees or promises, but I mean, given everything we've seen, it's highly likely we're going to see another one soon. And I would really hate for all this innovation to die because of it. So that's partially the motivation. Any other questions? Thank you.
Bringing down the house, man.
Yeah.